Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the shadows of an ancient city where the marketplace is just beginning to stir. Not with the hustle of midday, but with the hushed clatter of a night shift most modern folks would consider a nightmare. You're there, sandals kicking up a bit of dust that smells faintly of cumin and damp stone. The oil lamps flicker against clay walls, and somewhere a donkey sneezes, because of course it does, it's always the donkey. You probably won't survive this, at least not without a splinter in your toe or a questionable fig in your stomach. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening right now, tell me where you are and what time it is as you start this journey. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through narrow alleys lined with cracked bricks, the cool night air carrying hints of roasted sesame and the faint iron tang of tools left to rust after a long day. Vendors stretch their backs in half-darkness, some yawning into their palms, others muttering curses at tangled ropes and stubborn shutters. The moon, a pale coin above, seems to judge everyone equally. Shoppers, thieves, and sleepy merchants alike. Oil lamps sway from crooked poles, painting the cobbled paths with pools of buttery light. Your bare toes curl against the chill stone, and a stray dog watches with the kind of suspicion only creatures born in alleys ever master. One merchant slaps a sleeping apprentice awake. "Up, boy, before the bakers sell out of bread," he grumbles, and the boy stumbles toward a distant oven, likely plotting his escape to a quieter profession, like crocodile herding, or perhaps sand counting. Historians still argue whether this market truly operated through the stores, full night, or only during the cooler twilight hours. But either way, here you are, embroiled in the early stirrings of commerce. Somewhere beyond the walls, a caravan has just arrived, its camels grunting under sacks of grain, dates, and enough spice to season an empire. Your stall is waiting, a humble stretch of matting and a few stacked crates leaning at angles that would make modern architects faint. There's the faintest breeze from the river carrying the sound of distant flutes, thin, reedy notes that almost disguise the stench of yesterday's fish market lingering like a ghost in the cracks. A torch sputters above you, spitting resin as you duck beneath it. The night feels alive, the way a sleeping cat is alive, soft, but capable of sudden claws. You brush dust from your robes and start clearing a space for your jars. Clay clinks against stone. Someone nearby complains about missing olives again. The city's watch is nowhere to be seen, though their sandals left fresh marks in the dust. A pigeon, fat and entitled, waddles too close and eyes a pile of figs that aren't even yours. You wave it away with the same vigor you'd use on a tax collector, only slightly less rude. This is the hour before the hour, when only half the market is awake. Bakers fan their ovens, potters test their kilns. A man in a turban leans against a wall, peeling a pomegranate with the kind of slow expertise that makes you certain he's done nothing else for 20 years. Somewhere, behind a shuttered door, the first goats bleat to life. You rub your hands, still rough from yesterday's toil, and pull your shawl tighter, because dessert nights always lie about how warm they'll be. A mainstream fact drifts to your memory. Markets like this were often the beating heart of trade, not only in cities like Thebes or Babylon, but across Mesopotamia, where night trade allowed merchants to avoid the brutal heat of day. But here's a quirk. Some ancient sellers, especially spice merchants, were rumored to sleep in enormous clay jars right behind their stalls, believing the aroma would keep their lungs holy. You silently thank your stars you only smell faintly of goat cheese. The first copper clinks tonight aren't from coins, but from the far end of the alley. Someone adjusting their scale, perhaps, or someone trying to sound more prosperous than they are. A merchant with a crooked smile nods at you. He's the type to water his wine twice. Once with water, once with charm. He will try to sell you dates later at a price that would make even a Roman senator spit out his garum. You check the sky once more, the moon now sliding behind a wisp of cloud, and sigh. Oh, you know tonight won't be easy. Nights rarely are for market folk. There will be haggling, missed change, a cousin arriving with a dubious tax receipt, maybe even a passing inspection if the stars feel cruel. Still, this is the pulse of the city, and you're part of it now, barefoot and awake, heartbeat in sync with the coming tide of trade. Somewhere a distant rooster calls, too early, always too early, and you mutter about putting it in a stew. The city smells like dust and promise. Your fingers twitch. It's time to begin. You crouch at the edge of your stall, toes brushing the grit, palms dusty from unrolling the reed mat that will hold tonight's treasures. The clay jars, heavy and faintly sweating from the day's lingering warmth, are lined up like a mismatched family, some cracked, some lopsided, one still wearing the faint red smear of last week's spilled pomegranate wine. You start with the spices, because even in a sleepy night market, scent is everything. A pinch of cumin here, a whisper of cinnamon there, and of course the stubborn jar of peppercorns that refuses to open, its wax seal clinging like a toddler to its mother's hem. You grunt, twist, and finally mutter something that would make a temple scribe drop his stylus. A merchant 2 stalls over raises an eyebrow but says nothing. He's still trying to arrange his figs so the least wrinkled ones are on top. A little trick of the trade that. Historians still argue whether such cosmetic tactics were considered dishonest or just smart business in the ancient codes of trade. You wonder how many figs one could sell in a night just by turning them shiny side up. The air carries the first faint trail of smoke from a baker's oven, and it smells like opportunity and maybe slightly burnt wheat. Your own goods aren't glamorous. Dried dates, pickled olives, the ones no one's stolen yet, a few lengths of salted fish, and your pride, a jar of honey so thick it moves like syrup caught in a slow dream. As you arrange them, you catch yourself lining them in order of imagined value, like a board game where the rules are written in goat ink. A fringe tidbit floats through your mind. Some ancient market vendors, particularly in Egypt, used to sprinkle powdered natron, the same mineral used in mummification, around their stalls to keep away bad air and supposedly bad luck. You stare at the dust under your feet and wonder if you should have gone with natron instead of that half-hearted sweep you did an hour ago. Too late now. The market gods will judge you regardless. Your scales sit at the edge of the mat, one pan slightly heavier because a pebble has wedged under its hinge. You pluck it out and consider keeping it. Looks like a lucky stone, smooth and grey, shaped faintly like a fish. Into your pouch it goes. Somewhere in the darkness, a cat yowls and knocks over a jug. Someone curses about wine lost to the sand. You rub your palms together and take a moment to breathe in the mix of scents, coriander, roasted chickpeas from the next alley, the unmistakable tang of a freshly cracked amphora of vinegar. The night is still young, and only a few curious souls wander past. A woman with a scarf wrapped high over her face, clutching a bundle of cloth. A boy with a reed basket that smells strongly of goat. An elderly man humming what might be a hymn or might be just a stubborn tune stuck in his teeth. One pauses to peer at your honey. "Is it real?" he asks, voice scratchy as papyrus. You nod solemnly. "As real as your hairline," you say, with the kind of gentle sarcasm that makes a buyer smirk rather than storm off. He laughs, leaves without buying. But you know he'll be back. Honey always brings them back. You glance over your shoulder at the jar lids, clay stoppers tied with twine. Last week one went missing, and you had to improvise with a folded fig leaf and a prayer. This week you keep them closer. Someone once told you that a wandering monkey was responsible for half the missing lids in this market. You haven't seen the monkey, but you keep a stick handy just in case. The flicker of a new oil lamp down the lane signals more vendors arriving. A woman selling woven shawls arranges her colours like a dawn rainbow, even though the sun is still hiding far below the horizon. A potter wipes his brow, already dusty from the kiln. A boy, different from the goat boy but equally barefoot, offers to sweep your corner for a copper. You hand him a fig instead. He takes it without thanks, bites into it and vanishes like mist. Your fingers ache a little from arranging jars that seem heavier each night, and you mutter about building a wheeled cart. Someone once tried that here, you remember, and the cobblestones shook his whole stall to pieces by midnight. Perhaps things were meant to stay crew. Ked, a bit inconvenient, in this place where tradition outweighs comfort. The chill lingers in the air, sharp enough to raise goosebumps under your tunic. You tug your shawl tighter and press a palm against the clay jar of honey. Warm. Good. At least one thing tonight behaves. The peppercorn jar, still sulking, refuses to twist open without a fight. You'll deal with it later. For now, the mat is set, the jars are lined, the figs fluffed. You take a step back, squint at your work, and nod to yourself. Not bad for someone who nearly considered selling sandals instead. A cart creaks somewhere in the distance. That will be the caravan, heavy with grain and gossip. Soon the real night will begin. The first real wave of humanity stirs at the far edge of the market, a murmur of soft sandals and hard bargaining voices. You catch the gleam of a coin pouch swinging at a merchant's belt, far too optimistically, you think, given how early it still is. Your fingers drum against the jar of dates, each tap like a tiny dare for the night to begin. The oil lamps cast their thin, trembling halos, and within them faces emerge, lined, eager, or simply tired enough to haggle for sport. A man with a pointed beard approaches first, flanked by a boy carrying a basket of crumbling bread. His eyes dart to your spices, to your honey, then back to your hands as though they alone might reveal the secret to a fair price. "How much for the peppercorns?" he asks, rubbing his thumb against his forefinger in the universal sign for money. You hold up the stubborn jar, the one that gave you a wrestling match earlier, and say, "For you, friend, a price that will make your stew sing songs." He grunts, unimpressed, and offers half that price. This, of course, is the ancient dance. You pretend to look offended, he pretends to look bored. A donkey behind him sneezes in dramatic support of neither side. Historians still argue whether haggling like this was considered an art or a nuisance in marketplaces like these, but from where you stand, it's mostly theatre. Both sides pretending to be poorer than they are, both hoping the other is just tired enough to give in. You drop a single peppercorn in his palm. "Taste it," you say. He sniffs it, pretends to know what he's doing, and finally mutters, "Fine, a little more than half." Victory? Not quite. You settle somewhere in the hazy middle, and his boy hands you a coin that looks suspiciously warm, probably passed through more hands than an amphora of cheap wine at a sailor's tavern. Still, copper is copper. You tuck it into your pouch, already wondrous. Dang, how many like it you'll collect before the night fades. A woman approaches next, shawl drawn close around her shoulders, eyes sharper than a fresh chisel. She wants dates, only the softest, only the darkest, only the ones that make you question why you sell anything at all. You hand her 3, weigh them on your scale, thank the gods you removed that pebble earlier, and state your price. She shakes her head so vigorously her earrings clink like tiny shields. "Too much," she whispers. "I can get twice the amount for less from the boy with the crooked teeth." You sigh, smile thinly, and say, "Then may your teeth stay straight." Somehow that earns a chuckle, and she pays in full. A quirky tidbit drifts into your thoughts. In some ancient markets, it wasn't unusual for sellers to throw in a pinch of salt for free, claiming it would seal the deal and bless the buyer's home. Salt was precious, almost a currency itself. but superstition was often more persuasive than math. You consider doing the same tonight, but your salt jar is more half-hopeful dust than a generous gift. The oil lamp flickers dangerously, throwing your shadow across the jars in a lopsided dance. Somewhere a flute strikes up a wandering melody, the notes thin as spider silk. You find yourself tapping your foot in time, not because the music is good, but because staying still makes your knees stiff, and the last thing you need is to creak like an ungreased gate when the real crowd arrives. Another buyer steps forward, this one a travelling scribe by the ink stains on his fingers. He wants honey, complains about the price, then complains about the jar being too heavy, then finally buys two. You hand them over with a smile so polite it's practically sarcastic. He nods, satisfied, and mutters something about needing bribery material for a tax clerk. You pretend you didn't hear. The haggling continues in gentle waves, figs for 2 coppers, olives for 3, a slice of dried fish for someone's future regret. Coins clink, twine is cut, the night creeps on. Your shoulders warm from the press of the lamp's glow, but your toes remain cold as forgotten soup. It's a trade-off, like everything in this place. Warmth on top, chill below. A boy tries to pay you with a seashell, claims it's from the edge of the world. You take it, turn it over, it's chipped, nothing special, and hand it back with a wink. Bring me one that sings when you hold it to your ear, you say, and he vanishes into the crowd like a thief who just realized honesty is less profitable. The air is thick now, not with how. Eat, but with intention. Buyers are awake, sellers are sharper, and you're standing in the middle of it, one foot slightly numb, one hand already dusty from counting coins that feel older than your patience. A shout erupts somewhere near the bread stalls, someone accusing someone else of watering down their dough. You shake your head. At least your honey is honest, thick, golden, stubborn as the night. You rub your palms once more and glance at your jars, still full enough, still tempting enough. The real rush hasn't yet begun, but the market, like the moon, is swelling toward its peak. The hum begins soft, like bees far off in a field, and then grows, a chorus of murmurs, hooves, and laughter that belongs to no one and everyone at once. You lift your head, and there it is, the market truly waking, alive with sound. The first thing you notice is the rhythm of sandals slapping against stone, each footfall a heartbeat syncing with your own. Then the melodies spill in, flutes, thin and high, competing with the deep throb of drums somewhere beyond the torchlight. Its music meant less for harmony and more for chaos, for keeping tired merchants from dozing off on their scales. You lean against your stall for a moment, letting the sounds weave around you. A donkey brays so loudly you're convinced it's trying to audition for the flute player's spot. Someone laughs, a sharp, sudden bark that startles a pigeon into flight. Its wings beat the air like frantic fans, scattering a cloud of dust over a nearby potter's display. He curses in a dialect you don't recognize, something sharp enough to slice clay. You glance to your right and spot 2 women arguing over fabric, their voices rising like kettles about to boil. One insists the weave is Phoenician fine, the other claims it's woven by blind goats. Historians still argue whether marketplaces like this enforced any real trade regulations, or if it was simply a wild theatre of claims, counterclaims, and the occasional fistfight behind the spice stalls. Judging by the volume, you'd bet on the latter. The smell shifts. Less smoke now, more roasted meat. Someone's roasting lamb skewers near the gate, and the aroma snakes through the crowd like a thief. Your stomach growls in open rebellion. You mutter to it, promising something later if it behaves. You're not alone. Every vendor within 5 stalls is sneaking glances toward the smoke, wondering if they can spare a coin for a bite. It's the cruel joke of the marker. Tea. You sell food all night but never eat enough yourself. Another sound rises, a low chant, rhythmic and insistent. You follow it with your eyes to a cluster of travellers in brightly dyed robes, their camels tethered with ropes that glitter faintly in the lamplight, their traders from far-off deserts, their goods bundled in wool sacks that sag with mysterious weight. You catch fragments of their language, words like pebbles tossed into a pond, foreign yet enticing. Someone nearby mutters a warning about their prices, but you ignore it. Every whisper in a market is either a prophecy or a lie. A quirky tidbit flickers through your mind. Some ancient markets were rumoured to hire musicians not just for atmosphere, but as a distraction, so that thieves could slip unseen while shoppers swayed to the beat. You glance around, half expecting a nimble hand near your pouch, and tug it closer just in case. It rests against your hip like a sleeping cat, light but comforting. The drum beat grows bolder, and you realise your fingers are tapping the rhythm on the rim of your honey jar. A boy dances past, barefoot, laughing, spinning with arms out like a windmill gone rogue. His mother shouts after him, waving a stick, which makes him spin faster. You chuckle despite yourself. Moments like these feel timeless, as if even the dust remembers them. Then comes the cry, high, sharp, and eager. Fresh figs, sweet as kisses. You roll your eyes because the fig seller never shuts up, and he knows exactly how to bait your customers. Kisses, you mutter, glancing at your modest pile of dates. Maybe you should start yelling too. Dates, sweeter than apologies. No, too desperate. You settle for adjusting your jars so they gleam in the lamplight like tiny suns. The music threads through the chaos, and now even the animals seem to sway. A goat tugs its rope in time with the drum beat. A mule flicks its tail on the downbeat like it's been rehearsing. The whole market feels choreographed except for you, stuck behind your mat, resisting the urge to twirl with that barefoot boy. From the far alley, a shout bursts through the din, someone hawking jewellery, their voice like a trumpet cutting across a battlefield. The seller holds up a string of beads, swearing they're carved from stones blessed by the Nile. You'd bet your last fig they came from a ditch behind his house. Still, a small crowd gathers, coins ready. This is how it works. Confidence sells better than truth. Then the wind changes. It brushes your cheek, cool and laced with smoke and spice. It carries laughter, haggling, the thrum of life that will not sleep. You close your eyes for half a heartbeat, letting the soundscape wrap around you like a blanket. For all its noise, there's something soothing in its predictability. The rise and fall of voices, the clatter of pots, the whisper of a broom against tea stone. You open your eyes just as a man stumbles past carrying 3 live chickens, each clucking like a tiny merchant demanding better rates. One escapes his grip and bolts toward the fabric stall, leaving a trail of feathers and curses. The music swells to cover the chaos, and you can't help but laugh, soft and breathless. Nights like this belong to the market, to its noise and nonsense, its rhythm and raw pulse, and you, whether you like it or not, are part of its song. You're halfway through straightening the twine on your olive jar when the noise sharpens, no longer the pleasant hum of trade, but the brittle crackle of trouble. 2 stalls down, a man is shouting, voice hoarse enough to scrape clay pots clean. "Who stole the olives?" he bellows, holding up an empty jar like a trophy of indignation. The crowd hesitates, because nothing stalls a market faster than the promise of drama. And then, as if summoned by the gods of gossip, they begin to drift closer. You glance at your own olives, still here, still glistening in their brine like sleepy green eyes, safe for now. But the shouting man, broad-shouldered with a beard that could host a family of sparrows, isn't calming down. "I left them here this morning, or..." He pauses, furrows his brow. "Was it the other morning?" The crowd murmurs. A woman in a violet scarf shakes her head. Historians still argue whether he ever had olives at all, she mutters under her breath, and a few nearby vendors chuckle. Your neighbour, the ever-anxious fig seller, leans toward you and whispers, "Told you, can't trust him." Last week he accused a camel of eating his scale weights. You arch an eyebrow. And the fig seller shrugs. Camel looked guilty. The shouting man scans the market, eyes wild. I know someone took them. His apprentice, a boy too small for his apron, tugs at his sleeve and points toward a narrow alley where a stray dog licks something suspiciously oily from the ground. Could that be the trail? The merchant storms over, trips on a loose cobblestone, and curses so loudly a passing lute player skips a note. A quirky tidbit surfaces. In some ancient markets, disputes like this were settled by a professional market crier, a person whose only job was to stand on a crate and shout both sides of the story until one party gave up in embarrassment. You briefly consider volunteering. A voice carries decently, but decide against it. You have dates to sell, and besides, your olive jar is sealed tighter than a miser's coin purse. The crowd begins to take sides in the way only markets can, with exaggerated advice and very little evidence. One man insists the olives were taken by moonlight thieves. Another swears it must have been a tax collector with a craving. Someone even suggests the wandering monkey, yes, the same one blamed for missing jar lids, has returned now with a taste for brined snacks. You try to keep your own stall steady, but the ripple of commotion sends curious glances your way. A boy points at your olives. He has them. You roll your eyes, lift the jar, and let the brine catch the torchlight. Mine, you say firmly, counted, salted, and slightly overpriced. The boy laughs and darts off before his mother can scold him. The shouting match drags on, now involving a potter, two shawl sellers, and a very confused chicken. The chicken is new to the argument, but seems determined to add its opinion with each squawk. A donkey snorts like a disapproving elder. The whole thing is absurd enough that even you, weary and watching your coin pouch, allow yourself a grin. Markets thrive on chaos. If everything ran smoothly, people would shop and leave. And where's the story in that? A mainstream fact crosses your mind as the argument rages. Olives were a staple trade item across the Mediterranean and Near Eastern markets, often stored in large amphorae sealed with resin to keep them fresh. Losing a jar wasn't just embarrassing, it was a small economic blow. Enough, perhaps, to make a grown merchant howl at the moon like he's doing now. Eventually, a city watchman ambles over, his torch low and his patience lower. He listens for all of 30 seconds before declaring, "If you can't prove you had olives, you can't prove they're gone." The merchant sputters, the crowd groans, and just like that, the drama dissolves. People return to their stalls, muttering about how nothing ever changes. You exhale slowly, fingers tracing the rim of your olive jar. Still here, still safe. But the seed of suspicion lingers in the air, floating like smoke above the torches. Somewhere, someone is chewing on stolen olives, or maybe on the idea of stirring a little trouble, just to make the night less dull. A breeze carries the fading shouts away, leaving behind only the low thrum of music and the restless shuffle of buyers looking for something juicier than figs. You glance down the row of stalls, catch the eye of the fig seller again. He smirks. "Bet you 5 coppers he blames the moon next," he whispers. You shake your head. "Bet you he's already blaming it." And so the market rolls on, olives missing, tempers bruised, jars accounted for, and your night just a little more interesting than it was 10 minutes ago. Your stomach makes its opinion known before you do, a hollow growl that competes with the drumbeats somewhere near the gate. You glance at the jars, dates, honey, olives, peppercorns, all wonderful in their own right, but none quite capable of silencing the beast in your belly. Luckily, the market has a way of feeding even its sellers, if they're quick, discreet, and just hungry enough to call theft sampling. A boy with a tray shuffles past, his head barely reaching the handle of your honey jar. On that tray, small honey cakes dusted with crushed nuts, edges glinting with syrup so golden it might as well have been taxed by the gods. You raise a hand. "One," you say, fishing out a coin so thin you could almost hear it sigh in your palm. The boy eyes it, shrugs, and drops a cake into your hand with all the ceremony of tossing a pebble into a pond. It's warm, soft, sticky enough to make your fingers regret their choices. You bite in and the world briefly stops being about coins and customers. It's not just sweet, it's smugly sweet, the kind of flavor that makes your teeth whisper revenge. The figs, you decide, will never forgive you for this betrayal. Next to you, the fig seller catches your guilty glance and smirks. "So much for loyalty," he says, tearing at a chunk of stale bread that could double as a roofing tile. "Want some cheese?" He holds up a sliver wrapped in a leaf. It smells faintly of goat, strongly of ambition. You accept because a honey cake without a salty counterpoint is like a tax collector without a pen. Pointless. You nibble, the flavors colliding like two stubborn merchants arguing over the price of saffron. "Perfect," you mumble, "the meal of kings," or at least accountants. Somewhere a flute trills, perhaps in mockery. A mainstream fact surfaces as you chew. Ancient marketplaces often featured food stalls that stayed open deep into the night, serving quick, hearty fare, bread, cheese, roasted beans, to vendors and night labourers alike. The rich dined at home, the market dined on the move. A quirky tidbit slides in after. In certain regions, cheese was stored in clay pots sealed with olive oil, supposedly to ward off spirits that fed on milk. Whether it worked is unclear. Spirits are notoriously bad with receipts. You wipe your fingers on your shawl, promising yourself you'll wash it later. You won't. Around you the market swirls, torches flare, smoke curls, and somewhere a pot clatters as someone drops what was surely their entire night's profit. The smell of roasting chickpeas wafts over again, mixing with the tang of vinegar and the sweetness clinging to your lips. A woman in a faded green robe stops by your stall, eyes your olives, then your honey, then the crumb on your chin. "Sampling your own wares?" she teases. You grin, always. "Quality control, madam. Keeps the rats honest." She laughs, buys a small pouch of dates and slips away before you can make a better joke. Another merchant sidles over with a small cup of something steaming. "Bean broth," he offers, "on the house." It smells like comfort and mild regret. You take a sip, earthy, bitter, just enough to trick your stomach into thinking it's full. "Not bad," you say. "What's in it?" He shrugs. "Mostly beans, some hope." Historians still argue whether night markets like these encouraged community or competition, whether sharing food among vendors was a gesture of camaraderie or a strategy to keep rivals just hungry enough to falter. You suspect it's both. Generosity with a dash of self-preservation. The honey cake settles, the cheese lingers, the broth warms your insides like a lazy torch. For a moment the cold is gone, the coins forgotten, the jars just silent company around your feet. You lean back, chew the last sticky corner, and sigh the sigh of a person briefly content, even in a place that never truly sleeps. A boy darts by again, tray now half empty. "Want another?" he calls. You wave him off. "Sell it to someone richer." He grins, already gone, leaving behind a trail of crumbs and the faint memory of sweetness. You rub your palms together, eyes on the crowd. The night is still young enough for hunger to return, but for now you've made peace with your stomach. Let the flutes play, let the drums roll. You, humble vendor with sticky fingers and salty breath, are ready for the next wave of trade. You lean on your jars, the hum of the market now steady, like a tide that refuses to retreat. The crowd thickens, torches sway, and your ears catch fragments of conversations not meant for you. Yet you can't help but listen. A caravan has arrived, its merchants unrolling carpets as maps, its beasts tied with ropes that smell faintly of rain from somewhere far away. The air is stitched with stories tonight. Two men, one with a crooked tooth and the other with a crooked hat, pause just near your stall. They're arguing, no boasting, about their travels. One speaks of a desert where sand sings when you walk on it, a whispering music underfoot that even the stars pause to hear. The other interrupts. Nonsense, I crossed the salt flats where the air boils in the day and freezes in the night and saw a fish big enough to eat a camel whole. A fish? You nearly laugh aloud because in your experience, fish come in two sizes, too small to sell and big enough to regret later. You adjust your honey jar, pretending to be disinterested, but your ears stretch like sails in a welcome wind. A mainstream fact curls through your mind. Markets like these were often the news centres of their cities. Without printed bulletins or reliable couriers, gossip travelled with the merchants, war reports, famine warnings, trade routes opening and closing like impatient doors. A quirky tidbit rides in with the same thought. Some ancient traders claimed they carried talking maps, parchments that supposedly whispered directions if held to the ear under the right moon. Most were scams, of course, sold to wide-eyed travellers who later realised the only whisper was their own disappointed sigh. You sip from a small cup of leftover broth, eyes fixed on the men. Their voices rise as more gather. Curious boys, a shawl seller, the ever-present chicken that seems to haunt your section of the market. They speak of storms so fierce they stripped the paint from ships, of cities where coins were carved from bone instead of metal, of roads paved with stones that glowed faintly in the dark. Historians still argue whether such roads ever existed, mutters a nearby scribe, adjusting his ink-stained fingers around a steaming cup of tea. He looks tired enough to believe anything. A merchant from the east produces a small charm, a silver bead with a hole drilled through its heart. This, he says, keeps scorpions away. Someone scoffs. So does a heavy sandal, you murmur, too quietly for him to hear. He hawks the charm for 3 copper coins, and a weary traveller buys 2. The stories swell like the night wind, tales of bandits turned heroes, of caravans lost to dunes, of a city that trades in perfume so strong it makes your eyes water just hearing about it. You catch yourself drifting into the rhythm of their words, your own jars temporarily forgotten. That's the trick of markets. They sell not only wares but worlds, glimpses of places your sandals may never tread. One man gestures wildly with a stick, nearly toppling your date jar. You catch it with a swift hand, mutter something that rhymes suspiciously with goat, and he apologizes with the grace of a man who has never truly apologized before. He buys a handful of olives out of guilt. You call that a fair trade. As the crowd begins to scatter, the air feels fuller, heavier, like a curtain just lowered after a loud play. You hear the echoes of their journeys, the soft promises of far-off roads, and for a moment you wonder what your own story sounds like when told by strangers. Would they speak of your stubborn pepper jar, your honey thicker than morning gossip, or simply call you that market seller with the tired eyes and the quick hands? The merchants drift back to their carpets, their animals, their endless cups of watered wine. The boy with the crooked tooth tosses you a look that might be a greeting or a warning. Hard to tell in this light. The market exhales, the flutes pick up their tune again, and the drums resume their lazy heartbeat. You rub your palms together, jar lid snug, ears still echoing with talk of singing sands and giant fish. The night, you think, is bigger than the walls around you, and maybe, just maybe, some of its stories are true. The market suddenly shifts as if someone has tugged a hidden curtain. The crowd thickens, elbows brush, and torches flare higher, casting long, quivering shadows that crawl across the cobblestones like restless spirits. You brace yourself, planting one hand firmly on the honey jar, the other adjusting the twisted twine around your peppercorns. The night isn't just alive anymore. It's awake and bustling, and you're in the middle of its pulse. Children dart through ankles, barefoot and fearless, giggling as if chaos itself were a playmate. You smile, knowing full well that one of them will trip over a stray rope before dawn and cry as loudly as the man who lost his olives. A sudden rush comes from the main thoroughfare. Buyers arrive in waves. Families, travellers, city guards sneaking in a snack, and a man balancing two chickens like he's carrying treasures. Torches clatter in the wind, and a stray goat sees an opportunity to redecorate your sandals. You jump back just in time, narrowly avoiding hoof-on-toe contact. "Blessed be your hooves," you mutter sarcastically, already dabbing at dust and brine with the corner of your shawl. The goat, of course, ignores you entirely. The noise is a blend of every night market sound you've ever known. Haggling, laughter, the clink of coins, distant drumming and flutes that now seem to follow the crowd rather than lead it. You press your ear to the jars for a heartbeat, half expecting them to whisper secrets about the night's fortunes. They don't, and you sigh. Some things are disappointingly literal. Historians still argue whether such crowds were more dangerous to property or to nerves. A casual observer might see only commerce. An insider knows the unspoken hazards. Pickpockets weaving like shadows, traders testing your patience with impossible deals, animals plotting minor chaos. You, of course, are both participant and reluctant. Ant spectator. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Some merchants in ancient markets used to tie small bells to goats and dogs, not for charm, but so that the creature's mischievous movements could be tracked. You glance at the goat. No bells here, only chaos. The crowd moves in a tide, and your stall is now a small island in a sea of bodies. A man elbows past, whispering, "Dates? I hear your dates are sweet enough to make a camel dance." You suppress a laugh. "Only after a good nap," you reply under your breath. He doesn't hear, or pretends not to, and wanders off in search of sugar elsewhere. A child spins by, laughing, tugging at a basket filled with figs. They're careful, calculating, already practicing the ancient art of minor theft for experience. You consider warning him, then remember that every generation has its lessons. Besides, he's quick, too quick. Somewhere beyond, a lute strikes a sour note, perfectly timed with a vendor spilling a crate of onions. The pungent cascade smells like the night itself, earthy, sharp, a little bitter, and oddly comforting. You tuck a jar closer to your chest, protecting it from both falling onions and over-enthusiastic shoppers. A traveller from the north steps toward your stall, cloak heavy with sand and stories. He examines your honey, twists a coin in his hand, then glances at your olives. You smile gently, the kind of practiced smile that says, "I see you, traveller, and your coin is welcome here." He nods, makes a decision, and the transaction is done in seconds. The efficiency of commerce, amidst the chaos, is quietly beautiful. Drums roll louder, now more insistent, as if sensing the night's momentum. The crowd responds with energy, shoving and laughing, jostling and haggling. You breathe it in, the smell of roasted chickpeas, smoked meat, trampled straw mats, and you realize that chaos has its own rhythm, a pulse you've grown accustomed to. Your fingers drum along the jar rims in time, a personal percussion against the market's orchestra. By the time the next wave of buyers approaches, your senses are honed. Who will haggle? Who will pay outright? Who might drop a coin that disappears forever into the dust? You meet the night on its own terms, trading not just goods, but attention, patience, and subtle charm. Every coin that clinks into your pouch feels like a victory, every glance a small story, every misstep a reminder that the market is alive and you, for this brief night, are part of its heartbeat. The clink of copper becomes your new background music as you count the night's first wave of coins, stacking them carefully beside your jars. Each one has a story, a slight dent or scratch marking its journey through other hands, other pockets, perhaps even other markets. One coin rolls just enough to escape your attention, teetering near the edge of the mat, and you catch it in time, muttering about carelessness being a sin older than any city law. Counting coins is a ritual here. The weight, the shine, the tiny imperfections, they all speak to you if you listen closely enough. A child brushes past, their sandals scraping the stone, almost toppling the jar of peppercorns. You steady it with a swift motion and offer a soft admonishment, though the child is already gone, a blur of energy and mischief. The boy might be practicing for his own stall someday, or perhaps simply enjoying the thrill of minor chaos. Either way, you've played this part before. The crowd never stops moving, and neither do you, even when tiredness creeps into your knees like a polite but insistent guest. The first suspicious coin arrives, a pale, worn copper with an unfamiliar mark. You inspect it under the torchlight. Ancient collectible, you mumble sarcastically to yourself, though it feels more like a cursed pebble than a token of value. Historians still argue whether some coins in circulation were deliberately altered to deceive or simply survived centuries of wear and human neglect. Either way, it lands in your pouch, and you'll worry about it later. You glance over to the fig stall across the way. The fig seller is already haggling, his voice a delicate mix of charm and menace. You watch for a moment, noting how he uses the half-smile, the tilt of the head, the careful glance at a customer's coin pouch. Subtlety, practiced over years, gives him an advantage. You smile faintly, perhaps next. Year, you'll master the art. For now, your skill lies in patience and occasionally a well-timed joke about a donkey's intelligence. A quirky tidbit nudges your memory. In some markets, sellers would pass off particularly worn coins as charms or lucky tokens, claiming their age conferred mystical value. Buyers, often amused or desperate, would accept the tale. You briefly consider this for your suspicious copper, then shake your head. Honesty, for all its flaws, is less exhausting than inventing lore. The weight of your pouch reminds you that the night has been kind so far. Each coin is a small reward for attention, alertness, and the occasional well-placed joke. But counting coins is a double-edged sword. The more you count, the more you notice missing pieces, miscalculations, and the endless dance of barter. A coin slides under the mat, and you curse softly, fishing it out with nimble fingers, a gesture as familiar as brushing dust from your sleeves. Suddenly a man appears at your stall, wax tablet in hand, eyes narrowed. You stiffen. The taxman, or perhaps just a wandering scribe, paces slowly, scanning jars and mats as though he can discern wealth by smell alone. You offer a polite nod, hiding any nervous twitch that might betray the coins you've just counted. His gaze lingers on the honey, then your peppercorns, then finally on your face. He scribbles something, mutters, and moves on, leaving a whisper of unease in the air. Meanwhile, the crowd continues its ebb and flow. Buyers haggle over dates, olives, and figs, voices rising and falling like waves. A boy attempts to sneak a cherry tomato, distracted by the sudden arrival of a flute player, but his hand is caught mid-air. You shake your head, suppressing laughter, and let him retreat with a warning. Next time, ask politely. The boy disappears, leaving a small smile in his wake. A mainstream fact surfaces. Marketplaces in antiquity often relied on human vigilance rather than strict policing. Sellers protected their goods through experience, observation, and sometimes subtle intimidation. It was a system of trust and instinct, frail, yes, but functional in the absence of modern surveillance. Your night continues, hands busy, eyes scanning, ears absorbing stories and bargains alike. Each coin clink, each misplaced step, each whispered negotiation is part of the living rhythm. You realize that in this swirl of chaos and light, counting coins is more than bookkeeping. It's a meditation, a way to stay grounded as the night flows past like a river too wide to cross at once. A sudden shadow passes over your stall, tall and deliberate. You glance up just in time to see a man, official in appearance, striding through the crowd. His robe is heavier than most, his sandals polished in a way that suggests authority, and in his hand a wax tablet glints faintly under the torchlight. Your heart nudges against your ribs. An unexpected inspection is never convenient, even for seasoned vendors. You straighten your jars as best you can, muttering under your breath about how the universe always picks the worst time for surprises. The man stops, eyes scanning from jar to jar, coin to coin. You offer the faintest smile, one part charm, one part weary endurance. He tilts his head, making you wonder if he can sense the exact number of figs in your pile. The crowd parts subtly around him like water around a stone, leaving you exposed in the center. You clutch a small cloth, dusting the honey jar with precise strokes, hoping he appreciates effort even if the brine smudges. Historians still argue whether ancient market inspections were more about tax collection or public intimidation, and tonight you feel a little of both. The inspector scribbles on his tablet, tapping it against his fingers. He looks at your peppercorns, then back to your honey, and finally toward the scattered coins. His expression is neutral, unreadable, but you detect a flicker of amusement. Or is it impatience? You hold your breath. Somewhere a goat brays, perfectly timed to punctuate the tension, and you resist the urge to laugh. Timing, you remind yourself, is everything. A quirky tidbit drifts through your thoughts. Some inspectors in antiquity were rumored to test vendors by sneaking counterfeit coins or jars filled with sand into their stalls, purely to see whether they would notice. You pat the coin pouch instinctively. Maybe he's testing you, maybe it's just a coincidence. Either way, the act of readiness becomes ritual. The crowd seems oblivious, continuing their haggling and chatter. You notice a boy pointing at your jars, whispering conspiratorially to a woman nearby, and wonder if they think the inspector is some kind of magician or judge. The man with the wax tablet scribbles again, now tapping the end of his stylus against a jar. You hold your breath, half expecting him to lift the lid, sniff the honey, and announce, "This is exactly as it should be," or perhaps it isn't. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, the man steps back, surveying the surrounding stalls. He scribbles one last note, glances at you with a raised eyebrow that conveys both authority and faint curiosity, then strides away. The tension evaporates, leaving a fluttering in your chest and the faint scent of wax from his tablet. You release a quiet sigh, leaning against your jars, feeling the subtle thrill of surviving the inspection intact. You glance at your coins again, counting in your mind, noticing the small adjustments you must make to balance your takings. The incident leaves you both relieved and oddly energized. Proof that vigilance pays, even when it comes disguised as minor terror. Somewhere, a flute plays a wandering tune. The drums pick up again, and you return to the night's rhythm, jars aligned, coin pouch secure, ready for the next stage of trade. The night's rhythm has shifted. Drums and flutes now fill the alleys with a persistent, lulling beat. You sway slightly as you arrange your jars, letting the music seep into your shoulders, loosening the stiffness that has been creeping in since before moonrise. It's not a conscious dance, more like your body remembering motion it forgot it had. Even the donkey from earlier seems to nod along, braying in time with the drumbeats, as though it too appreciates a bit of rhythm between chaos and business. Merchants begin to move with the music, some unconsciously, others intentionally, using the slight sway to calm their nerves while negotiating. You notice a potter tapping his foot to the beat as he polishes a clay jug. A street performer strums a lute unevenly, and a nearby boy attempts to mimic him on a small drum, producing more enthusiasm than melody. You smile to yourself. Music is a strange currency here, more valuable than a coin at times because it buys patience, laughter, and minor mischief. A mainstream fact flits through your mind. Music in ancient marketplaces was often as practical as it was entertaining. Drums, flutes, and stringed instruments helped manage crowds, alert buyers to deals, and even signal market openings or closings. Tonight, it accomplishes all of that without anyone consciously thinking about it. You lean on your stall, letting the pulse of the night seep in, almost forgetting your hunched shoulders and tired feet. A quirky tidbit sneaks in. Some musicians were believed to carry magical influence in their songs, supposedly encouraging buyers to linger and spend. No historian can confirm it, but you've certainly seen enough shoppers distracted by an enthusiastic flute player to consider that maybe, just maybe, it works. You hum along softly to the tune, feeling oddly charmed despite yourself. You glance at your jars. Honey glows softly under. Torchlight, figs shimmer faintly. Olives glisten as if plotting their own rebellion. A customer approaches, drawn by the sound of the lute more than by any intent to buy. He examines your honey, nods approvingly, and slides a coin across the mat without a word. Sometimes you think, a good song is better than a good pitch. Nearby, a young woman trades lightly with a fig seller, both of them nodding in time to the drumbeats. You notice subtle movements, a tilt of the head, a raised eyebrow, a gentle nudge of coins, all in sync with the music. Even the chaos of commerce becomes a kind of choreography when sound threads it together. You reflect on how your own transactions have shifted subtly tonight. Gentler gestures, measured words, a touch of charm aided by the background score of flutes and drums. Historians still argue whether these musical cues were intentional strategies or happy accidents, but you have no doubts. The market's pulse is undeniably influenced by music. It regulates attention, tempers frustration, and occasionally ensures that no one steals more than they should. Your ears now catch even subtle rhythms in footsteps, coin clinks, and whispered negotiations. You adjust your shawl, tug the lids on your jars one last time, and sway just a little more in tune with the music. A child drifts past, laughing, spinning an empty basket like it's a drum. You can't help but chuckle. This night, unlike any other, feels alive not only with trade, but with song. The drums guide, the flutes enchant, and somewhere in the middle of it all, you are simply part of the rhythm, vendor, listener, participant in a living orchestra made of commerce, chaos, and melody. The air hums with energy, warm and almost tangible, as the market finds its tempo. You straighten one final jar, feeling the steady heartbeat of coins, footsteps, and music pulse through the night. Tomorrow, you'll count the losses, recount the profits, but tonight, music is the currency, and you are richer for it. The night deepens, and with it comes a subtle shift in the crowd. The earlier waves of bustling shoppers have thinned slightly, leaving behind those who linger for reasons beyond commerce. Storytellers, travelers, the curious and the restless. You notice them first by the way they move, slower, deliberate, almost savoring the market as a sensory map rather than a place to buy and leave. A man in a faded cloak examines your jars, not for purchase, but seemingly studying their arrangement, perhaps imagining the stories they might tell if they could speak. You straighten the lids on the honey and figs, even though you know it's largely performative. Presentation matters, even to unseen eyes. Nearby, a group of children chase each other between stalls, their bare feet making soft drumming on the cobblestones that blends oddly well with the flutes and drums. One trips, catching himself with a hand on your mat, and you offer a wry smile instead of a scolding. Careful, you murmur. This market bites lightly but memorably. He grins and darts off again, leaving a faint trace of laughter that hangs in the air like the scent of roasted chickpeas. A mainstream fact drifts through your mind as you adjust a jar of peppercorns. Ancient marketplaces often doubled as social centers. People came not just to buy or sell, but to exchange news, gossip, and rumors, essentially functioning as informal information hubs long before newspapers or letters were widespread. You realize tonight, with every overheard conversation and sidelong glance, that this is still happening. History has a pulse, and you can feel it in the shuffle of feet and the soft rustle of cloth. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some night vendors reportedly kept small charms hidden beneath mats or jars, believing they could ward off petty thieves, bad luck, or even disputes over figs. You glance beneath your own stall mat, imagining a tiny talisman at your feet, and chuckle. Perhaps superstition and practicality have always walked hand in markets like these. Your attention is drawn to a tall merchant leaning against a post while juggling coins in one hand and humming a tune you don't recognize. His eyes meet yours briefly, sharing a moment of mutual recognition, two people navigating the delicate balance between vigilance and exhaustion. A customer approaches, distracted by the humming, and buys a handful of dates without haggling. You nod in quiet approval. Sometimes charm is a more potent currency than words. Historians still argue whether evening trade was more about necessity or leisure, and in this gentle lull of activity, you see both. Vendors persist for the sake of livelihood, yet the lingering crowd, the wandering musicians, and the curious travelers transform the market into a theatre of human behavior. Even the animals, donkeys, goats, and chickens, seem attuned to the rhythm, moving with an unspoken understanding of the night's tempo. You step back briefly from your stall, breathing in the mix of scents: honey, figs, roasted chickpeas, and a faint whiff of river mud. It's comforting, grounding, a reminder that while the market is chaotic, it is also alive. Every jar, every coin, every passing footstep is a small note in the symphony of commerce and community, and you are both performer and audience. The night stretches on, each moment unfolding like a slow, deliberate melody. The rhythm of the market continues to shift around you. Flutes trill in unexpected harmonies, drums pulse lazily, and distant voices rise and fall in gentle waves. You notice a merchant across the way, balancing a delicate vase in one hand while counting coins with the other, his expression a careful mix of focus and resignation. You nod subtly, market camaraderie in silence. Historians still argue whether night markets were primarily about profit or social connection. Watching the mingling crowd, you can see evidence of both. Buyers seeking necessities, travelers sharing stories, children playing, and vendors like you carefully orchestrating attention and goods. Every gesture, every glance, every coin exchanged is part of a larger dance that continues unseen by those outside. You take a deep breath, the night air cool and scented with a faint mixture of smoke, honey, and crushed figs. It settles over your shoulders like a soft blanket. You glance down at your jars, still lined neatly, your coin pouch resting safely beside you. The market hums around you, persistent and alive, and for the first time tonight you feel entirely present within it, a participant, an observer, and somehow a guardian of this small, bustling world. A ripple of excitement moves through the crowd, subtle at first, then growing into a tangible energy that buzzes across the cobblestones. You glance up to see the arrival of a traveling storyteller, robes dusted from the road, a staff in one hand and a small satchel of scrolls in the other. His eyes sweep the crowd, scanning for an audience, and you realize that the market is about to shift once again, from a center of trade into a stage for narrative. Vendors pause mid-transaction to listen, children freeze in curious anticipation, and even the goats seem to twitch their ears toward the sound of an approaching voice. He begins, softly at first, reciting tales of distant cities where rivers ran with spices, mountains that hid precious metals, and deserts where the sand itself seemed to whisper secrets to those who dared walk barefoot. You lean against your stall, the jars of honey and figs catching the torchlight like tiny suns, and feel the weight of the night melt into something more ethereal. The storyteller's words have a rhythm, almost musical, and the drumming and flutes in the background seem to fall into sync with his cadence. A mainstream fact surfaces. Oral storytelling in marketplaces was a crucial medium for preserving history and culture, especially in societies with limited literacy. Tales of heroes, disasters, clever merchants, and daring travelers circulated alongside actual goods, ensuring that knowledge survived across generations. Listening now, you feel part of that living tradition, each word embedding itself into the night air like dust or scent. A quirky tidbit flits through your mind. In some regions, storytellers carried tiny charms in their satchels, said to enhance memory or protect the audience from bad luck during their tale. Whether effective or superstition, it lent a certain gravitas to their performance. You imagine the storyteller reaching into his bag, perhaps feeling for one such talisman, before continuing a particularly dramatic episode about a camel who outwitted an entire caravan. The crowd leans in, eyes wide, children perched on crates, adults craning their necks to catch every syllable. You notice a man with ink-stained fingers, likely a scribe, taking careful mental notes, perhaps for later transcription. A woman laughs softly at the camel story, nearly spilling a coin pouch, while a boy hides a stolen fig behind his back, torn between mischief and appreciation for the narrative. Historians still argue whether storytelling in marketplaces was primarily entertainment or a subtle form of instruction. Observing the listeners, you can see both at play. The story enthralls, teaches, and reinforces cultural memory simultaneously. It's a living, breathing lesson embedded in human curiosity. You straighten your jars once more, letting the soft hum of the crowd and the storyteller's voice wash over you. Each passing minute stretches the night, making the market feel more like a small, self-contained world. You catch the flicker of torchlight on coins, the sheen of honey, the dusty edges of your peppercorns, and realize that in this tiny patch of organized chaos, life continues in rhythm, unpredictable, full of story, and entirely yours to witness. The storyteller's voice fades gently as a new rhythm seeps into the market, a lighter, more mischievous energy that signals a shift. You glance up to see a group of performers weaving through the crowd, acrobats balancing small crates, a juggler tossing coins, or maybe just stones painted to resemble them, and a pair of dancers twirling in perfect sync despite the uneven cobblestones. The torchlight catches their movements, casting long, flickering shadows that chase each other across the walls and ground. You can't help but admire their timing. It's a careful choreography layered atop the chaos of commerce, and the market seems to hum in response. A boy skids past, nearly tripping over your mat, and you steady your jars with a swift hand. "Watch where you spin, little one," you mutter softly. He giggles, ignoring you completely, and joins the circle of dancers. Children and adults alike are drawn into the spectacle. Even the goats glance up, ears twitching, as if understanding that tonight performance is currency alongside coins. A mainstream fact bubbles into your mind. In ancient marketplaces, performance and trade were deeply entwined. Musicians, acrobats, and storytellers often drew crowds that became ready buyers, making entertainment both a practical and cultural feature of commerce. Tonight, you see the proof firsthand. The market is alive, not just with sales, but with laughter, awe, and the thrill of shared experience. A quirky tidbit strikes you. Some traveling performers were rumored to carry enchanted props, coins that multiplied, or so the tale went, when tossed skillfully, or juggling sticks that would never fall. You glance at the juggler, skeptical, and note that even if the magic is fake, the skill is real. The boy's coin toss is clumsy, yet somehow mesmerizing in its earnestness. The air is thick with anticipation. A customer, drawn more by the dancers than by the honey, steps up to your stall and buys a small pouch of figs without negotiating. You smile faintly. Tonight, attention, like coins, flows in unpredictable ways, and your role is simply to remain ready. Historians still argue whether performance in ancient markets primarily served commerce, morale, or social cohesion. Observing this scene, it's easy to see all three. Coins change hands, laughter spreads, and a temporary community forms around shared delight. Even the animals ever present seem to approve. Chickens cluck in rhythm with the dancers' spins, and the donkeys stamp their hooves like percussionists. You straighten your mats, checking jars and coin pouch, aware of the transient magic of the moment. The performers whirl past again, the crowd cheers, and the night stretches on, a seamless blend of trade, story, and spectacle. The market feels almost infinite, its rhythm steady and pulsating, reminding you that even in chaos there is a pattern, and in that pattern your place is secure, attentive, patient, and part of a living, breathing world. The energy in the market has shifted yet again, settling into something gentler but no less compelling. The performers have moved on, leaving traces of laughter, applause, and the faint scent of oil lamps smudged on their skin. You watch as the crowd recalibrates, adjusting their attention from spectacle back to trade. Coins exchange hands with a softer clink. Hands linger longer over jars of honey or figs, as though savouring the quiet after excitement. You straighten a line of peppercorns, the rhythmic motions grounding you in the familiar tasks, while your ears remain tuned to the ambient hum. The torchlight flickers over a traveller approaching your stall, carrying a small bundle of textiles from lands far beyond. You notice the frayed edges, the subtle embroidery, and the faint scent of spices that cling to the cloth. He examines your honey, turns a jar slowly in his hands, and asks questions in a tongue that you only partially understand. You respond carefully, using gestures as much as words, mindful that tone is as important as vocabulary. The jar glimmers in his eyes, catching the torchlight, and he nods, finally offering a coin in exchange. The transaction is silent, understated, but it feels weighty, like a bridge built over distance, culture, and need. A mainstream fact surfaces as you wipe your hands on your shawl. Marketplaces in ancient cities were crossroads of culture, not just commerce. Merchants carried not only goods, but also ideas, beliefs, and stories, forming an intricate web of influence that connected far-flung regions long before modern communication existed. Tonight, with this traveller and others passing by, you witness that network in motion. A quirky tidbit intrudes. Some traders claimed that honey from certain regions had subtle properties. It could soothe minor ailments or even sharpen the mind for negotiations. You hold a jar lightly, imagining a sleepy customer suddenly growing eloquent after a taste. The notion is half superstition, half marketing genius, and entirely appropriate for a night like this. A boy darts past, carrying a small pouch of figs he's likely pilfered or perhaps been given. History may never clarify. And you suppress a chuckle. He spins around a crate like a gymnast, narrowly avoiding a collision with a potter balancing freshly fired jugs. Chaos and grace coexist in perfect tension here. The crowd barely reacts. They've grown accustomed to this nightly dance where vigilance and curiosity intermingle. You glance toward the edge of the market where a group of women haggle over textiles, their voices rising and falling in a playful cadence. One insists a shawl is woven by angels. Another counters that it's soft as a summer cloud. Historians still argue whether such hyperbole was common practice or simply a dramatic flourish unique to storytellers and entertainers. Listening closely, you suspect it's both. Commerce thrives on exaggeration as much as on honesty. Meanwhile, a small dog trots past your feet, nose twitching in curiosity. It sniffs at the jars of honey and peppercorns, pauses, then moves on, unbothered by the human's busy negotiation. Animals have an uncanny sense of rhythm, you think, more attuned than most people to the subtle currents that guide the night. Even the donkey from earlier seems less obstinate now, patiently waiting near a hay bundle as if it understands its role in the market's ecosystem. A sudden clatter draws your attention. A crate of pomegranates has toppled further down the aisle. The vendor curses lightly, but the crowd laughs, not mockingly, but in that warm way that makes the night feel communal. Someone stoops to gather the scattered fruit, handing a particularly ripe pomegranate to a child who beams with triumph. You nod subtly, noting that even minor chaos carries lessons and rewards, a reminder that the night is alive and unpredictable. Your stomach reminds you that the honey and figs from earlier were only a small consolation. You nibble on a leftover crumb, realizing that part of the market's charm and challenge is the constant negotiation between appetite and duty. You glance at a nearby vendor preparing roasted chickpeas, their aroma curling toward your stall. You debate silently about trading a few coins for a small portion, but decide against it. Discipline, after all, is as much a part of your craft as coin counting or jar arranging. Historians still argue whether night markets were spaces of necessity or leisure, and tonight you witness both. Necessity in the careful calculation of transactions, leisure in the way the crowd drifts, interacts, and allows moments of human drama to unfold. The market is a living organism, responsive to the movements, voices, and gestures of every participant. Your role, while humble, is integral. You anchor the chaos, provide goods, and absorb stories. A nearby musician begins to play a soft, lilting tune on a flute, weaving through the background hum like a gentle thread. You can feel the rhythm settle into your bones, coaxing your shoulders to relax and your mind to focus. Even the coins in your pouch seem to shift with the melody, a small imaginative notion, but comforting nonetheless. You tap a finger along the jar rims, an unconscious percussion accompanying the flute, and find a strange satisfaction in the harmony between motion, sound, and responsibility. The crowd begins to thin gradually, some traders departing to rest, others lingering in conversation. You notice subtle gestures of camaraderie, a shared joke between vendors, a nod to a child who's fetched water for an elderly merchant, a quiet exchange of advice on selling techniques. These are small, easily overlooked interactions, but they form the invisible architecture of the market. Tonight, it feels tangible, like the pulse of the city has condensed into this one small street. A quirky tidbit returns to your mind. Some ancient vendors believed that finishing the night with a silent moment, acknowledging the unseen and unspoken currents of the market, would ensure fortune for the next day. You lean against your jars, absorbing the soft murmur of conversation, the faint smell of roasted nuts and honey, and the cool draft that slips through the narrow alleys. For once, you feel the rhythm of commerce in its purest form, balanced, patient, and strangely comforting. The night's pulse is steady now, slower and more deliberate, like a tide pulling back to reveal hidden stones. You straighten your shawl, secure the lids on your jars, and adjust your coin pouch one last time. The market has taught you something again. In chaos there is rhythm, in transaction there is story, and in the small, repetitive motions of your hands and eyes there is belonging. The night is deep, the air cool, and for the first time in hours you allow yourself a quiet smile. A faint chill drifts through the alleyways, brushing against your skin and ruffling the edges of your shawl. The torchlight flickers, elongating shadows and lending the market a mysterious, almost dreamlike quality. You straighten your jars once more, fingers tracing the rims as if reassuring them that everything is still in its rightful place. The coins in your pouch weigh comfortably against your hip, their familiar clink a soothing counterpoint to the hum of the night. Even in the midst of chaos, these small certainties feel grounding. a reminder that you are both observer and participant in this nightly rhythm. A group of travelers pauses near your stall, their faces tired but curious. One of them, a young woman, leans in to inspect your figs, turning them in her hands as if studying the lines of an intricate map. You smile, offering the softest encouragement. "Sweet tonight, as always." She nods, coins exchanging hands with practiced ease, and moves along. You watch her join the others, and a sense of satisfaction settles in your chest. Even brief connections like this, the silent acknowledgement of effort and quality, carry weight in the unseen ledger of your night. A mainstream fact enters your thoughts. Marketplaces in antiquity were hubs not just for trade, but for social interaction, knowledge exchange, and the subtle reinforcement of community norms. Every transaction, every glance, every whispered joke or gentle admonishment contributes to a shared rhythm that extends beyond the individual stalls. Tonight, you feel that pulse distinctly, like a heartbeat beneath the cobblestones. Nearby, a child darts past, trailing a stray dog that seems more intent on exploration than mischief. They pause near your stall, wide-eyed, and peek into your jars with fascination. You offer a small fig, which the child accepts with a shy, delighted grin. It's a minor gesture, but in the quiet tension of the night, such moments feel expansive. A quirky tidbit drifts into your mind. Some vendors believe that sharing food, even minimally, could ward off ill fortune or appease unseen spirits lurking in the market. Whether superstition or kindness, the act creates a subtle bond with the world around you. The torches cast warm, uneven light across the stalls as more patrons meander through the alleys. Conversations rise and fall, punctuated by laughter, soft exclamations, and the occasional clatter of an overturned crate. A potter down the way bends to retrieve a fallen jug, shaking his head with a bemused expression as he mutters about gravity's cruelty. You can't help but chuckle softly. Even in the most orderly moments, the market retains its characteristic unpredictability. Historians still argue whether the night market functioned primarily as an economic engine or as a social and cultural theatre. Observing the ebb and flow of shoppers, travellers and vendors, you notice elements of both. Coins are exchanged, yes, but so too are stories, gestures and fleeting moments of shared experience. Every action, however minor, resonates across the narrow streets, creating an invisible tapestry of interactions that link one stall to the next, one person to another. A merchant from the east approaches, carrying a small bundle of spices wrapped in delicate cloth. He nods to you in greeting, scanning your jars before producing a handful of coins. The transaction is swift, smooth, almost effortless, yet it carries the same weight as the more dramatic exchanges earlier in the night. You recognize the rhythm, attention, negotiation, resolution. It is a cycle repeated countless times across markets in history, yet each iteration feels uniquely alive in this particular night. The wind shifts slightly, carrying the faint scent of roasted nuts and honey, blending with the earthy aroma of the alleyways. You breathe deeply, letting the mingling scents anchor you further into the night's tempo. The subtle musical undertones of flutes and drums from earlier seem to weave through the shadows again, soft and nearly imperceptible. Even absent performers, the market hums with an invisible music, footsteps, whispered haggling, the occasional bray of a donkey, all forming a living composition. A child drops a coin near your mat, nearly hidden beneath a scattering of peppercorns. You pick it up, tucking it carefully into your pouch, mindful that every coin carries more than just monetary value. It represents attention, decision, and trust. You glance at the jars, noting how the torchlight dances across the honey, olives and figs, and realize that tonight, each object, that no matter how small, has its own quiet significance. As the night progresses, the energy settles further, softening into a calm yet vibrant flow. Buyers move with deliberation, conversations are measured, and even the animals seem to tread lightly. You find a quiet moment to lean back against your jars, fingers idly tracing the rim of the honey jar, and allow yourself a deep, slow breath. The market, in all its chaotic beauty, has shifted into something almost meditative, a living ecosystem of trade, story, and subtle human interaction. The night deepens, and the market's energy softens into a gentle, steady hum. The earlier chaos, the rushing crowds, clanging jars, and flaring torches, has given way to a more deliberate pace. You take a small step back from your stall, letting your shoulders relax and your mind drift with the rhythm of the evening. The jars of honey, figs, olives, and peppercorns glint softly under the torchlight, their subtle sheen reflecting the quiet pulse of the market. Every coin in your pouch seems heavier now, weighted not just with value but with the narrative of each exchange, each brief human connection. A young traveller, hooded and dusty from the road, pauses before your stall. His eyes are tired but curious, scanning your wares with the careful attention of someone seeking sustenance and comfort after a long journey. He picks up a jar of honey, lifts the lid, and breathes in the rich, floral scent. You offer a small smile, one part warmth, one part practiced vendor charm. "Sweet tonight," you murmur softly. He nods, producing a coin and tucking it into your palm with quiet gratitude. It's a small, understated transaction, yet it carries a weight far beyond the monetary exchange, a fleeting connection, a shared moment of humanity in the heart of commerce. A mainstream fact arises as you watch him walk away. Marketplaces in antiquity were not only centers of trade, but also nodes of social connection, cultural exchange, and storytelling. Travelers, merchants, and locals mingled, sharing news, tales, and customs, often creating networks that stretched far beyond the immediate city. Tonight, with the slow ebbing of the crowd, you can feel that network pulse faintly through the alleyways, a subtle reminder that commerce is never purely transactional. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Some night vendors were rumoured to place small tokens or charms beneath their stalls to attract both fortune and friendly customers. Whether superstition or marketing strategy, it added a layer of ritual to their work, a symbolic reinforcement of vigilance and hope. You glance beneath your own mat and imagine a tiny charm tucked in the shadows, a silent guardian of your wares. Nearby, a group of children play a quiet game of chase, weaving carefully between stalls to avoid toppling jars or mats. One trips over a crate, letting out a small yelp before laughing and getting back up. You can't help but smile. Even in the waning hours, the market thrives with energy and life. The children are part of this ecosystem, minor participants and witnesses to the ongoing rhythm. Their laughter a soft counterpoint to the clink of coins and rustle of cloth. Historians still argue whether night markets functioned primarily for economic survival or social enrichment. Observing the scene, it is evident that both are true. Trade provides sustenance, while shared experiences, fleeting connections, and subtle performances enrich the social fabric. The market, in its entirety, is a living organism responsive to the smallest gestures and movements. A faint scent of roasted nuts and warm bread drifts from a nearby stall, reminding you that even small pleasures can punctuate the night. You pull a few coins from your pouch and offer them to the vendor, who nods with a wink and hands you a warm handful. You taste a roasted chickpea, crunchy and slightly smoky, and allow yourself a brief moment of indulgence. The flavors mingle with the ambient aroma of honey, figs, and earth, grounding you further in the present. A flute plays softly in the distance, weaving a gentle melody through the alleyways. You notice that even without deliberate audience attention, the music influences the market's rhythm, slowing footsteps, encouraging pauses, and drawing attention to the subtle beauty of the night. You tap a finger lightly along the jar rims, an unconscious percussive accompaniment, and marvel at the delicate harmony between human activity and ambient music. A woman approaches, examining your olives with careful fingers. She inspects the sheen, the texture, and the firmness, and after a brief negotiation, hands over a coin and departs. You watch her leave, noting how each transaction carries both tangible and intangible value, sustenance, social connection, and a subtle affirmation of your skill and attention as a vendor. As the night continues to settle, you find yourself leaning back slightly, letting the soft glow of torchlight and flickering shadows lull your mind into calm observation. The market is alive but slower now, each move meant deliberate, each sound gentle. Even the animals, donkeys, goats, chickens, tread with care, as if sensing the market's winding down. You reflect on the rhythm of the night, commerce, story, sound, and scent interwoven seamlessly, a living tapestry that stretches beyond any single stall. The market feels different now, quieter, deeper, almost intimate. The earlier rush of voices, clinking coins, and laughter has faded to a gentle murmur. You lean against your stall, hands brushing over the jars, feeling the smooth curves of honey and figs, the textured surface of peppercorns, and the slight give of olives nestled in their containers. The tactile familiarity is comforting, grounding you in the moment as the night edges closer to dawn. Shadows stretch longer now, softened by the diminishing torchlight, lending the alleyways a dreamlike quality that makes each corner seem like a secret waiting to be discovered. A wandering storyteller pauses nearby, his voice softer than before, recounting tales in a tone almost conspiratorial, meant only for the attentive ears still lingering in the market. He speaks of distant mountains where the wind carries secrets, of rivers that change course with the full moon, and of travelers who traded not just goods, but wisdom. You watch as a small circle forms around him, faces illuminated by torchlight, eyes wide with fascination. You feel the pull of his stories, the gentle tug of imagination that temporarily lifts you beyond the tangible world of jars, coins, and customers. A mainstream fact drifts through your mind. Oral storytelling was a vital tool in ancient marketplaces, serving to educate, entertain, and maintain cultural memory among largely illiterate populations. Tales were shared alongside trade, embedding lessons, humor, and morality within commerce. You recognize the subtle power of narrative tonight, weaving a thread that ties the scattered participants together, giving structure and rhythm to the nocturnal activity. A quirky tidbit nudges your attention. Some storytellers were rumored to carry small charms or tokens that supposedly enhanced the listener's retention of their tales or protected the audience from misfortune. Whether superstition or tradition, it adds a sense of ritual and depth to their presence. You imagine a tiny charm tucked into the folds of his cloak, amplifying the resonance of his words as they float through the cool night air. Nearby, a child tiptoes past, clutching a small fig, trying not to draw attention from anyone. You smile faintly, remembering your own youth and the thrill of minor mischief. The child's careful movements mirror the rhythm of the market now, measured, thoughtful, yet alive with curiosity and wonder. Even the animals, goats, chickens, and donkeys, move with subtle attentiveness, their soft noises blending with the distant hum of conversation and muted instruments. Historians still argue whether nighttime markets were primarily functional for trade or served more as social and cultural hubs. Observing this quieter stretch of the evening, it becomes evident that both aspects coexist. Commerce proceeds with deliberation, and at the same time, the market functions as a living stage for interaction, observation, and subtle learning. Every gesture, every coin exchanged, every whispered tale contributes to a dynamic, interwoven tapestry. A young man approaches, inspecting your honey with careful attention. He tilts the jar in torchlight, noting its texture and aroma, then selects a coin and offers it with a quiet nod. The transaction feels ceremonial in this slower, contemplative phase of the night. Even simple acts of commerce carry layers of meaning now, intertwined with observation, respect, and mutual acknowledgement. The torchlight flickers as a soft breeze passes through the alleyways, carrying the faint scent of roasted nuts, honey, and dust. You take a slow breath, letting the mixture of smells, sounds, and textures anchor your awareness. The night, once bustling and relentless, has evolved into a gentle flow, allowing space for reflection, for noticing small details, for savoring the quiet triumphs of a well-kept stall. You brush your hands over the jars one last time, feeling their reassuring solidity. The coins in your pouch rest heavily yet comfortably at your side, each one a testament to patience, attention, and the ebb and flow of the market's rhythm. Around you, the final participants linger, whispering farewells, exchanging soft laughter, and slipping quietly into the night, leaving the alleyways with only the echo of presence. The market's pulse has slowed, softened, and yet remains alive, like a heartbeat beneath the cobblestones, steady and reassuring. You inhale once more, feeling the subtle vibrations of commerce, story, and human connection around you. Tonight, you are both witness and participant, and in this quiet culmination, the market's living tapestry is fully realized, rich, layered, and beautifully human. The night has reached its deepest hour, a soft, velvety darkness broken only by the faint glimmer of dying torchlight along the alleyways. You adjust your shawl, tugging it tighter around your shoulders against the cool draft that slips between stalls. The jars before you, honey, figs, olives, and peppercorns, catch the occasional flicker of light, their surfaces glowing faintly like miniature lanterns guiding you through the ebbing night. Coins lie settled in your pouch, each a quiet reminder of transactions completed, attentiveness rewarded, and minor dramas survived. The market, now mostly emptied, hums softly, its pulse slower, but unmistakably alive. A lone traveller pauses near your stall, his cloak dusted from the road, eyes bright with curiosity and fatigue alike. He lifts a jar of honey, holding it to the torchlight to inspect its colour and clarity. You smile softly, your voice gentle as you murmur, "Sweet enough to brighten the darkest hour." He nods, offering a coin with a quiet, respectful gesture before moving on, leaving you with a sense of calm accomplishment. Even the smallest exchanges carry meaning at this hour. Sustenance, gratitude, and the subtle human connection that threads the market together. A mainstream fact enters your thoughts. Ancient night markets served as vital community hubs, extending beyond commerce to social interaction, cultural exchange, and even storytelling. Each jar, each coin, each lingering conversation contributed to a shared rhythm of human experience. Tonight you feel that rhythm more acutely than ever, its patterns subtle but unbroken, stretching across the quieted stalls and empty pathways. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some vendors in antiquity would place small charms or tokens beneath their mats to attract fortune, safeguard their wares, or ensure harmonious interactions. You glance at your stall, imagining a tiny talisman, and hidden beneath a jar, and feel a small sense of reassurance. Whether superstition or tradition, it seems fitting in this calm, reflective moment. Nearby, a group of children, now tired from hours of play, whispers quietly as they navigate between stalls, careful not to disturb any jars. One pauses to peer curiously at your honey, his small fingers tracing the rim of the jar. You offer a smile and a nod, the simplest acknowledgement of presence in the market's vast tapestry. Their laughter has long faded, replaced by soft, deliberate footsteps that blend into the muted symphony of the night. Historians still argue whether night markets functioned primarily for survival or cultural enrichment, but here, in this hushed interval, both purposes coexist seamlessly. Commerce continues quietly. Attention, courtesy, and subtle learning persist. Every movement, glance, and exchange contributes to a complex, living network that transcends the simple buying and selling of goods. A soft wind carries the scent of roasted nuts, honey, and damp earth across the alleyways. You breathe deeply, letting the fragrances anchor you further into the moment. Each inhalation is a reminder of the market's richness, a living ecosystem of human interaction, trade, and sensory experience. Even absent the bustling crowds, the space feels vibrantly alive. You lean against your jars, running your fingers over their smooth surfaces one last time, and glance down at the coins nestled in your pouch. Their weight is comforting, a record of attentiveness, patience, and careful navigation of a night both demanding and rewarding. Around you, the few remaining figures move with deliberation, exchanging soft words, coins, and nods of respect. The market's pulse is gentle now, a rhythm of calm and completeness, an echo of the vibrant life that filled the alleyways hours before. As your night draws to a close, you reflect on the intricate patterns woven between jars, coins, footsteps, and whispers. The market is more than a place of trade. It is a living organism shaped by every participant, every sound, and every story told or overheard. The honey, figs, olives, and peppercorns are not merely goods. They are anchors in a complex human tapestry, connecting you, the buyers, and the unseen forces of night into a single flowing rhythm.